balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 128. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. I help moms with breastfeeding. Welcome to new motherhood. These first few weeks are such a crazy time in your life, filled with happiness and joy and wonder, along with the realization that your life has changed in so many ways in such a short period of time, and there is no way you could have ever understood before this time what it would feel like for you. I'm speaking to moms of a baby that's anywhere between 4 days old and 14 days old. Some of you have been there already, and you'll find this information really interesting and fun, and some of it you wish you had known, and some of it you're going to be glad to share with friends that you have. And some of you have not given birth yet, and you're looking forward to this time. And some of you are right in the thick between day 4 and 14. I know for me, there were so many emotions I experienced that I could not even tell the difference sometimes in how I felt. When I cried, were they tears of happiness and joy? Or were they just tears because I was upset and so sleep deprived? Was I crying because I had no idea what had just happened to me between the birth and all of a sudden becoming a mother? I mean, I was now someone's mother. Even though I had 9 months to prepare for the birth and adjust to the fact that I was going to be a mother, all of a sudden, all that time thinking and preparing for this time, well, all of a sudden it was like I had no idea where my head had been for the last 9 months. Have you felt that way? Every time I did manage to close my eyes, I was reliving the birth. I mean, no textbook or class ever prepared me for what really happened to me. Almost every time I woke up, it was to the sound now of a crying baby. Had my life changed in the last few days? Oh, yes, it did. And congratulations to you. Your baby is now 4 to 5 days old. You are just beginning to get the hang of breastfeeding. Sure, you might feel awkward with it all. However, you are now getting used to a baby feeding at your breast 8 times a day. In previous shows, we've talked in depth about how do you know your baby has a good latch and how do you know breastfeeding is going well. You are now at a point where you're continuing to experiment with different positions to find which ones seem to work best for you and your baby. In some places, you will find you need to use a pillow and a stool. Other places where you're sitting down feeding your baby, well, your setup will be different. Perhaps you have tried laying down and feeding your baby, maybe in a reclining position, and are finding that this is quite relaxing for both of you. Don't expect to figure it all out in a few weeks. These are the days of experimenting, and you should not be afraid to do so. As your body begins to recover from the birth and pregnancy, and you are moving around better, and especially if you've had cesarean section or you've had some tearing, it takes a little time. But as you continue to experiment, you will start finding what works best for you and your baby. You may be losing patience with yourself, thinking you should know how to do all this already. After all, breastfeeding is a natural thing to do. How many times have I heard that? Well, you're right about that. However, just because it's a natural thing to do does not necessarily mean that it comes naturally. How can something you've never even attempted to do before come naturally, right? That's what I think. I mean, just think about it for a minute. Once you realize that you're a newbie, hopefully you'll be kinder and gentler with yourself. By day 5, you definitely should notice that your baby has transitioned from those dark, sticky, black stools to those lovely yellow, mustardy color stools. They might look like cottage cheese or have what looks like little black sesame seeds in their stool. This is totally normal, as weird as it sounds. Instead of being a very offensive odor, you might be surprised to learn that while breastfed baby stools have an odor, one that is quite distinctive, it frequently does not make you gag. In fact, I find it has almost a sweet smell. I always thought my kids' poopy diapers smelled like this candy from when I was a kid, and they were called sweet tarts. Funny how these weird memories come creeping up as I am thinking about all this. Let's talk about the details, all the nice-to-know information about breastfeeding in the early weeks. Today we're going to go from day 5 to day 14. It would be fairly normal for your baby to be interested in both sides per feeding. You always want to let your baby finish feeding from one side, and when done, always offer the second side. If your baby falls asleep after the first side, I would suggest a diaper change, either real or fake. What's fake? Well, you open up their diaper and you find out that there's no package in there for you, so you don't want to waste a diaper, but you could just wipe their tush with a wet one or a little cloth that's wet to see if you can rouse your baby, and then you just close the diaper up. If your baby wakes up, you offer the second side. If after about 15 minutes of trying with a very sleepy baby, then I would say just leave your baby be if he or she won't wake up until your baby shows hunger cues again. It would be fairly common for your baby to have feedings that are inconsistent, and as far as frequency goes and as far as time spent breastfeeding each feeding, well, some babies, they literally do what some of the books say. It's as if they read the textbooks. They feed for 15 minutes on each side, every 3 hours like clockwork, and they sleep the whole time in between and rarely fuss. If this is what your baby is doing, and your baby is full and has normal output, then this is normal for your baby. If your baby breastfeeds every 2 hours for 3 feedings in a row, and then sleeps for 4 hours before waking up to feed again, and then is full from feedings and has normal output, this is normal. Babies typically do not follow the textbook. They typically do not feed 15 minutes on each side, sleep for 3 hours. Most babies are spreading feedings out maybe every hour and a half to 2. Some sleep for 4 hours in between, some sleep for 3. Some have shorter feedings, some have feedings from just one side, and some always take both sides. That alone is not signs of a good feeding or to be able to tell whether they're getting enough or not. We have all the other signs that we've talked about nutritive sucking, output, weight loss, weight gain, which we will be reviewing again. The reason I don't want you to get too hung up on specific times and frequencies is because mothers are individuals with different milk supplies, and you all have different babies with different degrees of effectiveness at breastfeeding. So their frequency of feeding, whether or not they take one side or both, and how long they feed for, those are not really good ways of figuring out if breastfeeding is going well. Some mothers have an abundant supply, enough to feed, my joke is, several other babies on the block. If this is the case for you, you'll usually hear your babies gulping and gulping and gulping at the breast, and they literally can be done after like 15 minutes on one side only and happily sleep consistently for 3 hours. While this does happen, it's not the norm, particularly in the first few weeks of life. It would be more common for your baby to be interested in both sides for most feedings, and more likely they're going to be actively feeding for a good 20 to 30 minutes on each side. So an average feeding for a new mother of a baby at least up to 8 weeks is usually a baby taking both sides and usually feeding for 20 to 30 minutes on each side, which means that between that and burping in between, an average feeding would take 45 minutes to an hour. But after the feeding, your baby should be pretty tanked up and it should be painless for you. So what I want you to do is see and think about, well, one mom can have tons of milk and her baby very effective, 15 minutes on one side and her baby is fully tanked up. Or you have the next mom whose baby almost always feeds for 20 to 30 minutes and takes both sides. And both of those are normal. And that's why I'm saying we do take that into consideration, but that is not how you decide if your baby is feeding well and breastfeeding is going well. So I hope you're getting the picture of what it is that you really want to take a look at to figure out the signs about breastfeeding, if it's going well or not. Remember, all that we talked about with regards to nutritive sucking behavior, you will want to be sure that your baby is actively drinking and transferring milk, keeping up a good sucking rhythm, and that nothing is hurting with breastfeeding, and you are sure your baby is getting enough food. Once you know this, you can then begin to rely on your baby's signs that they have had enough, rather than let the clock tell you they're done. I often say to moms, watch the baby, not the clock. Anyone who tells you specific feeding frequencies and specific time at the breast is a person who is not well educated in normal breastfeeding. Please, please, please do not listen to them. I find that mothers tend to focus on the wrong things when assessing how breastfeeding is going. They focus on how often their baby is feeding, if they take both sides or not, how long a feeding lasts, how long in between feedings. Rather than focus on the time or which breast and for how long, I need for you to focus on, is the latch good? Is it comfortable? Is your baby spending quality time at the breast sucking nutritively and transferring an average volume in an average time frame? And is your baby gaining appropriately? And do they have the appropriate output? In other words, you can chart that your baby came to the breast 9 times in one day. You can document how long your baby stayed on each side. And if you get in the right amount of feedings, the books say, and your baby spends the right amount of time, the books say, you'll feel that breastfeeding is going well. However, your baby spending 15 minutes at the breast but sleeping is not the same as your baby spending 10 minutes of good quality sucking. Your baby spending 15 minutes at the breast, and if you are crying in pain, it's not the same as 15 minutes of a baby nutritively sucking at the breast and you being in total comfort. Your baby spending 15 minutes at the breast feeding and you have a much softer breast when they're done is not the same as your baby spending 15 minutes at the breast with your breast being just as firm as when they began. So I hope you're getting the picture. It's not just the time that they spend at the breast. It's what are they doing while they are at the breast. My hope is that you are beginning to learn what it is that you should be focused on when assessing how breastfeeding is going. Ultimately, what we are looking for is this. 1, is your baby having good nutritive sucking quality at the breast? 2, can your baby get enough milk with each breastfeeding to keep him satiated for an hour and a half to 3 hours? Is breastfeeding comfortable for you, and does your baby seem to be comfortable at breast during the feeding? Is your baby having the normal amount of output and having about 8 feedings a day? If the answer is yes to all this, breastfeeding is going well for you, and this will probably be confirmed at your next pediatric visit when your baby is weighed. There is a normal rhythm to his feeding, and your baby should not be sleeping at the breast. You should not be nudging to keep your baby to stay awake. You should not need to use tickling or blowing on their face or wet washcloths to keep them awake to feed. You might want to feed your baby skin to skin, but you should not have to do that in order to keep them awake. Sleepy babies at the breast means poor feedings, and this is a huge red flag for you to get expert help. I know it sounds like I'm harping on this. However, this is one of the most common reasons why babies lose weight and moms don't build a good supply, because their babies are not latched on well, breastfeeding is hurting, and their baby is spending time at the breast mostly sleeping and not really transferring much milk. Very, very, very common. So I really push to bring that point home. A lack of output is a huge red flag also that they are not getting enough. By day 5, you should be able to feel the weight of their pee diaper, and the coloring should be clear to light yellow. If there is not much pee, or it is a dark color, or has a strong odor, this is a sign of not getting enough and possible dehydration. So this is another huge red flag. By day 5, your baby should have already gone through 4 days of frequent stooling, with the colors and consistency changing from the very early dark black and sticky meconium to a lighter and lighter brown, less sticky, to a very definite 2 to 3 quarter-size stools on day 5 that are yellowish in color and cottage cheese or seedy in consistency. And babies should be stooling at least 2 to 3 times every single day. At least up until they're about 6 weeks old, and then it changes, but we'll get to that another time. A lack of stools and dark stools are all a big red flag. Please, please, please do not let anyone convince you that lack of output is okay. This is like a huge siren. It's a huge warning sign that tells you you need to meet with an experienced IBCLC to ensure that all is going well and to pick up any signs that breastfeeding is not going well and rectify it as soon as possible. Remember, we talked about the fact that your baby should not lose more than 7 ounces in the first 4 to 5 days? And 7 ounces, I would say, is on the higher end of weight loss. Well, now your baby should be gaining from the 5th day on. Your baby should be gaining enough so that he's back to birth weight or within an ounce or 2 at 14 days old. One more very common breastfeeding behavior that we often see develop in the first few weeks is something lovely called cluster feeding. Have you heard of other moms talk about cluster feeding? If you have, I'm sure they did not have a smile on their face. If you don't know about or understand cluster feeding, this can really throw you off. Cluster feeding is when babies bunch feedings close together at certain times of the day, and for every baby, the time will be different. You may begin to worry that you don't have enough milk because they literally give you hardly any break between one feeding to the next. This cluster feeding session usually happens for maybe 3 to 4 hours. It usually happens in the evening, but not always, and it usually follows a longer sleep period. It's like they just feed and feed and feed and feed and feed and feed, and then they finally get tanked up and go for a longer sleep. While there are many theories as to why cluster feeding happens, the truth is we don't really know why. Some will say that it's your baby's way of boosting your supply, and yet I have seen some moms with more than enough milk who have babies who have cluster feeding sessions every single day. We just know that if your baby typically spaces out all other feedings in the 24-hour period, is happy most of the other times, has normal output, weight gain, and is otherwise breastfeeding well, then cluster feeding is nothing to be concerned about. Once you're sure everything else with breastfeeding is going well, and you have these consistent cluster feeding sessions once a day, it is more about how to respond to the cluster feeding times rather than thinking something is wrong that you have to fix. Whether the reasons for cluster feedings, whether it's because the supply is lower during this time, or whether the flow is slower during this time, or whether it's just a time period that your baby wants to be held and cuddled or rocked and swayed more, it really doesn't matter so much. What matters is that you understand that this is a very normal newborn breastfeeding behavior, and now that you understand it, you also need to understand it could last for a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. Now you know that it is normal, you're saying to yourself, oh man, how can I possibly deal with this, particularly at the end of very tiring days? Well, I find that knowing that it's normal and that you're not alone, it usually takes a huge weight off mothers' shoulders, as they typically feel they're doing something wrong or that they don't have enough milk. Once you've determined that you have a good supply, your baby is gaining well, breastfeeding is comfortable, and you recognize this for what it is, cluster feeding sessions, well, knowing this is normal can help to reduce your stress a few notches. Taking a break for a few moments to talk to you about how I can best help you, my listeners. I am real excited to finally be in a position to expand my services and offer the best that I have to give to women all over the world. For so many years, I have used all my years of experience in counseling moms about pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and breastfeeding, and I've used this knowledge to work with and counsel women locally. Over the years, one of the most common complaints that I hear from moms about their pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, and postpartum experience is that there were so many things they wish they could have been told. And I've always wanted to do something more, reach more women than I could ever do on a local one-to-one basis, and the time is now. I really want to be able to talk about things that moms feel that they didn't have enough information. Things like, I didn't know my options during pregnancy. Do I use a doctor or a midwife? What's the difference? What's the difference between a home, a birthing center birth, and a hospital birth? Why would I choose one childbirth class over another? There are classes that will fit one personality and it probably wouldn't be good for the other. Or your philosophy towards your own personal health and the lifestyle that you lead. So I can help people choose what kind of classes are best for them. People have a lot of questions. Maybe they don't even know what doulas are, or they kind of sort of do, but don't really know fully about them, or if it's something that they would want to use or have. So we get to talk about birth doulas and postpartum doulas. Lots of common pregnancy problems that you're just not being talked about or even read about. We get to talk about them. And you know what? Also, how to really prepare for the birth. And I don't mean just what items to take with the birth in your checklist and your birth plan or how to get through labor, but emotionally and a shift in the mindset way of preparing and where your partner fits into all this, where your family might fit into all this. Lots of people need guidance, and I help provide this for you. Many moms and dads find that they are in a state of shock when it comes to newborn parenting and the emotions of postpartum, how this affects every being of their life postpartum. Their life as a couple, how interaction between family and friends need to be adjusted. And of course, one of the biggest subjects that I talk about a lot also is all things having to do with breastfeeding. I have now opened the doors to offering these services worldwide. Just go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz and you will see all the lovely details. This combined with something new and exciting that I will be unveiling the first week of January 2017. And I am one happy and very excited person. Stay tuned for the excitement that I will share the end of December. For right now, let's get back to the show. Now that you know you can anticipate this behavior, you need to come up with a game plan on how to deal with it rather than thinking you need to fix it. It becomes pretty clear to you that for a few hours, you probably can't count on being able to do much of anything except feed your baby. Here are some things that might help you. Baby wearing. You can wear your baby in a wrap or a sling, and your baby might be happier for a little longer being held close to you. With your baby in a wrap, you may be able to eat dinner as your hands are free. Something else that might be helpful to you, speaking of dinner, if this always seems to happen around dinner time, you might say to yourself, well, maybe I should try eating dinner a half hour earlier than you might have otherwise done or what your habit is. This way, you're not getting hungrier and hungrier as your baby wants to nurse more and more frequently. At least you've had your dinner. And speaking of food, when you plan for cluster feeding, you can help yourself by having quick and easy snacks that you can grab. Have all the makings for a protein shake in one spot so you can put it all together in 5 minutes or less and drink it during the cluster feeding time. Of course, having someone in your household help you during this time period can be a huge help. They can make something for you to eat, bring you drinks, snacks. They can hold your baby. They can take your baby out for a walk for a short period of time, just to free you up, even 15 or 20 minutes, so you can eat your dinner. You can use the restroom, take a shower in between quick feedings. If you have other children, boy, it will be incredibly helpful if you have someone else who can take care of the other kids during this time of day. If your baby is not incredibly fussy and does not need to be rocked and sang to and just wants to feed frequently, what better time to plan on binge watching one of your favorite shows? As long as you are sure these normal cluster feeding sessions with the baby and you're sure that's what it is and that otherwise breastfeeding is going well, you definitely do not want to offer your baby milk in a bottle if at all possible. Now, moms, they tend to do this not because they planned on it, but because of their own internal pressure or pressure from outside sources, when the thinking is that you do not have enough milk and there is a strong tendency to want to give baby milk in a bottle. You know, offering your baby milk in a bottle means that he will get full from a large volume in a very short period of time. This means that he will not be interested in coming to the breast so frequently. Sure, this gives you a break, but at the same time, it will likely cause your supply to drop. Less breast stimulation, less breastfeeding equals less milk. This will surely undermine your confidence as you watch your baby gulp down a lot of milk. You and others will say, see, he was hungry. Yes, we know he was hungry. And your frequent feedings will ultimately satisfy his hunger and signal your body to make more milk. So you don't want to work against what your body is naturally trying to do. Your take-home points for day 5 through 15 are: number 1, knowing how to tell the difference between really good sucking behavior and good milk transfer, and babies who are just hanging out of the breast. This is one of the most important things for you to learn about breastfeeding. Without good milk transfer, your baby will not gain the proper weight, and you will probably struggle with your supply. Number 2, understanding that breastfeeding should not hurt or cause sore nipples, cracked or bleeding nipples, and ongoing engorgement. Painful breastfeeding usually leads to poor milk transfer and lack of weight gain, and you will likely struggle with your supply. Painful breastfeeding frequently leads to chronic clogged ducts and breast infections. 3, understanding normal weight loss and weight gain and the time frame for this. Understanding normal output and color and volume and consistency of output is important information for you to have. And last but not least, the wonderful subject of cluster feeding. I'll be honest and just put it out there that cluster feeding can be real difficult for some. Knowing that it's normal and having a game plan on how to respond to this behavior can make all the difference. Please do educate your family members about cluster feeding and elicit their help during these few hours each day. And help is by them supporting you, not telling you that you're not making enough and you need to supplement. By educating them of the normalcy of cluster feeding will help well-meaning family members to continue to support you with breastfeeding, rather than suggest you offer supplements because your baby is so hungry. As always, I hope this information shared during this season of Frequently Asked Questions has been helpful to you. Please share the links to the All About Breastfeeding show with family or friends that you feel could use this information. I always say, don't keep this as the best secret ever. Let other people know too. One of the most common complaints that we hear from mothers is, why didn't anyone tell me all this information? Or they complain about having inconsistent or wrong information. We want all mothers who want to breastfeed have access to good, accurate, consistent, and up-to-date information. Don't keep this great show to yourself. Share it with a friend. That's it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed and got lots of information on this show that talked about day 5 through 14. Until the next show, bye-bye. Have you heard that Phoenix, Arizona is blessed with an amazing birthing center? Baby Moon Inn Birth Center is the best option for families who want access to midwifery care in and out of a hospital setting. You can experience birth in a comfortable home-like setting where natural birth is the focus. Laboring in water, being able to walk outside during labor, and enjoy the beautiful garden. This is what birth can be like for you. There is so much more to learn about Baby Moon. The staff would love to have the opportunity to meet you and would like to extend an invitation for you to attend a free Choices in Childbirth class and a tour of the birth center. All you need to do is call 602-314-7755. That's 602-314-7755 and ask for the tour dates. You can also go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast, and on the right-hand side of the page, you will see a link that will bring you to the calendar, and you can sign up for the tour yourself. When you come in for the tour, make sure that you tell them you found out about it from the All About Breastfeeding podcast, and you will be given a very lovely free gift.